Hi everyone, nice to see you all again. Thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we are going to be talking about feedback in language learning. Can we get useful feedback when we are learning a foreign language? If so, how can we get it and who can we get it from? Those are the questions that I would like to talk about a bit today. I still remember the first time that a Japanese person said to me, "Oh, your Japanese is so amazing. If I couldn't see your face, but I was just listening to your voice, I'd think you were Japanese." I still remember the first time someone said that to me. And the lady who said it was very nice. She was the mother of a Japanese friend of mine. This happened the first time I went to Japan, which is about 26 years ago now. But my Japanese then was probably at that kind of level where you're transitioning from a B1 to a B2. You can say a lot of stuff and you can understand a lot of stuff. I can speak properly, but there's a lot of stuff you can't say properly, and a lot of stuff that you hear just goes straight over your head. So at that stage, I was told by a very, very nice lady who I have very fond memories of, that I was just like a Japanese person in terms of the way I spoke Japanese. Now, I probably don't have to tell you that she was being nice in that way that Japanese people very often are. But to me it was clear, of course it was clear that what she was saying was false. In some sense it was a lie, but it was a friendly lie, right? I was fortunate in that it never occurred to me for a moment that that could possibly be true. It was overwhelmingly obvious to me that I was not speaking Japanese like a Japanese person. But how do we get useful feedback? It's hard to keep developing. It's hard to keep moving forward with a complex skill in some sense if you don't know where you are with it. If you don't know how good you are at it, how are you supposed to know what you're aiming for, or what you should be working on, or whether you should still be trying to work on it at all? After all, if I was speaking Japanese like a Japanese person, then arguably I should have quit my studies. What would have been the point, right? But like I said, I knew that wasn't true. And it's interesting just to think more generally about feedback in language learning. Can we get useful feedback? Who can we get it from? How knowledgeable do they have to be? Asking a native how well you're speaking their language and thinking that you're going to get useful feedback from them, meaningful, accurate feedback, just because they're natives, that's crackers. Why? Well, for lots of different reasons. People are polite. And often people are flattered when you study their language. They're just pleased. They're not going to say, "Yeah, your grammar's off and your pronunciation's all cruddy." If you're speaking their language, they're going to say, "Oh yeah, you speak it really well," or "Yeah, you speak it pretty well." That's the first problem. People don't want to, kick your feet out from underneath you. And that's nice, but it's not helpful. Another problem is that many people are just not linguistically sophisticated. They don't know what they should be listening out for. They think that if they can understand you more or less, then you must be doing quite well. But this is a very relative matter. Maybe your pronunciation is really bad and they have to concentrate pretty hard to understand what you're saying, but think, "Oh, I can understand him, so he's doing reasonably well." It's very difficult. Really, you need to get feedback from linguistically sophisticated people who have learned languages, thought about languages, taught languages, and who are in a position to make some sort of judgment. The fact that somebody speaks, broadly speaking, correctly does not mean that they're speaking particularly well. You can speak accurately and at a relatively low level if you're just not getting that deep into what the language allows you to do. There are people who communicate quite effectively using simple language when they speak a foreign language. Is that a bad thing? It's not a bad thing. If they're communicating well, it's a good thing, but it's also not something that's indicative of a high level of ability, an advanced level of ability in the language in question. I would point out that human beings in general are so ignorant of the way their languages are actually pronounced that they are not capable of giving useful feedback. Of course, they know native-like speech when they hear it, course, they produce native-like speech when they speak their own native languages. However, these people are not going to be able to give you useful, actionable feedback on how well you're pronouncing a language. There are many people on YouTube making videos in English, which for them is a foreign language, not their native language, and pronouncing it quite badly. And it can be quite painful to listen to some of this stuff if you're sensitive to these things like I am. And I do wonder whether these people really understand how they come across when they speak English. Do they know what mistakes they're making? Do they know how difficult they are to understand in certain regards? It's not clear to me. So, feedback is helpful, but how do we get it? How do we get useful, actionable feedback when we're studying a foreign language? Well, you're going to have to ask somebody who knows what they're talking about, who knows what sorts of standards you've set for yourself, and who has incentives to be honest and not just say, oh, you're really good. Somehow you have to find linguistically knowledgeable people who can actually be analytical about what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. And like I said, they should be familiar with what you're aiming for. If you're just aiming to be somewhat conversational in a language, then a native saying to you, oh, you're doing really well, that might be legitimate feedback. But if you're aiming to be genuinely at some sort of advanced level of fluency, then someone at exactly the same level of ability might have to be told, well, you're making mistakes here and you're making mistakes there and you're messing that up. And that might all be necessary feedback. To a significant extent, if we're attentive and we're careful, and if you have a certain degree of talent, we can figure out for ourselves what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong by comparing what we do to what the natives do when they speak. But even if you've got the kind of brain that can make those sorts of comparisons, the chances are you're still missing stuff. The chances are you're still missing stuff. Sometimes I tell people about English pronunciation when I'm teaching English. I tell them about, I speak to some Russian speakers who are kind of astonished to be told that I can't tell the difference between their version of the word back and their version of the word bag. It's never really occurred to them that there's any particular difference between those two words. They probably know that one ends in CK and the other ends in G. But because you don't have that kind of phonemic distinction in Russian, many of them don't hear it very clearly. So of course they can't produce it very clearly. And when you stop people and say, when you say the word dog, it sounds like dock to me. And I can only figure out what you're saying from the context. People are quite taken aback sometimes. They didn't know there was anything going on there. We need help. All of us need at least some help, I think, because we just can't pick up on everything. So feedback is important, and you can only get it from people who are knowledgeable and who are honest. And many people will not give you honest feedback. And many people who want to will not be able to give you knowledgeable feedback. So I do believe, even if you don't have any particular reason to work with a teacher regularly, I do believe that it's a good idea to speak sometimes with a teacher, an experienced teacher, if you can't find someone to do it for free, and say, what am I doing wrong? Hit me, just give me the truth. And then you have a chance of getting some really useful feedback. Another example, again about pronunciation. Many people who learn English as a foreign language are not capable of pronouncing the words can and can't properly. This is complex. The word can is usually reduced to can in most contexts, not in all contexts. So it has an inconsistent, if you like, pronunciation. There are other problems. Most languages don't seem to have this distinction that we have between our low front vowel, a, and our, what am I trying to say here, and our low back vowel, r, in English. So we're talking about the vowels in cat, right? That's the low front vowel, and cart, that's the low back vowel. The low back vowel is longer in duration. Cat is short, cart, or can't, you could say, right? that vowel is long. A lot of people have terrible problems with that vowel. In American English it would be different on the whole, right? But I'm talking about British English here. Many people have terrible problems accurately hearing and producing that pair of vowels. Last but not least, you have to take into account the fact that the T at the end of can't is often not released. If I want to say I can't find it, I say I can't find it. Under normal circumstances, we don't tend to say I can't find it, right? But that's especially true if the verb coming after the word can't begins with an alveolar consonant. I can't time it properly. You don't normally say I can't time it properly, right? So anyway, long story short, that distinction between can and can't is so hard for so many people to make that you can't tell what the hell they're saying. I can do it. I'm going to talk about this in another video. I can do it. Oh, you can do it. No, I can do it. Oh, you can't do it. Sometimes you really can't tell. You're just guessing from context. And of course, sometimes you guess wrong. This is a big problem for people, but a lot of people don't know that they're doing this wrong. A lot of people do not know that they're doing it wrong. A lot of people can't correct it even when you tell them that they are doing it wrong. But that is a separate problem. At least if you tell them, they have the chance to improve. So anyway, okay, I'm blethering a bit, but feedback is important, especially with pronunciation, I think. If I want to check that my grammar is right, I can compare my sentences to the sentences produced by natives. I can just ask myself, which words am I putting into my sentence and in which order? But with pronunciation, it's not that easy. You can't just ask yourself if you're making the right sounds or not. That's the problem. You don't know necessarily. With vowels, you don't know if you're pronouncing them properly, right? So feedback is great, and it is worth paying for. You don't have to do it all the time, but get someone who's knowledgeable. Get someone who's knowledgeable and who will just tell you the truth. You might be surprised. About the insights you can gain into what you're doing on the strength of a bit of timely feedback from people who generally know what they're talking about. Anyway, thanks for listening. That's it for today. I'm going to head off. Hopefully I'll see you next time. That's it for now. Ciao, ciao. Bye bye.